the phone lines and find out whether the recent exit by Britain from Minister, and thanks for your time.
Good evening, and good evening to your viewers and listeners.
Now, sir, we have been struggling to find out whether there's any correlation between the Ghana and Britain in respect to how our trade is going to pan out in the coming years, especially considering the fact that Britain has now left the European Union.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think that to understand, the question you are posing, we must understand what an economic union is. An economic union, and I think that maybe we can relate it to what we have, here. Even though we have not matured to that extent, we are talking about an ECOWAS situation. So you can think about a situation where we now have 15 members, West African countries constituting ECOWAS, which came into force in the 1970s, just like the EU. And then, due to a referendum, as we are saying, one of the member countries, Ghana, Cote d'Ivoire, or one of them says, I no longer want to be a member of ECOWAS. It's a similar situation that is confronting us. I think that we can put this in context. Now, in the case of the EU, it has matured to the point where, just as we have in ECOWAS, you have free movement of people and goods. Many of the ECOWAS countries now use what you call ECOWAS passports. That means that if you are traveling to Nigeria as a Ghanaian today, you don't need a visa, at least for a period. And they have gotten to a point where there is free movement of business and people can go and work. In our case, in ECOWAS, about 3 months. But in the case of the EU, you can work in other member states, as a result of which their economies are integrated. So this is the context, what we are. I just want to draw a parallel, around home for us to understand what is going on. Now, because the economies are integrated, the Britain still uses the pound sterling. I'm coming to the very first area where you can see an impact. Britain, even though it's a member of the EU, does not use the euro. They still use the pound sterling. But there is an exchange rate relations between the pound sterling and the euro, between the pound sterling and the dollar. And for that matter, between these currencies and the Ghana, cedi. This is the first link you want to draw. And as you know, when commodity prices go down, we talk about commodity prices going down because the demand for those commodities in the advanced countries, often goes down. And therefore we earn less foreign exchange, and therefore we eat into our reserves. When that happens, then the cedi weakens. So in the last few days, the major current commentary that has been running is that the pound sterling is losing value because Britain wants to leave the EU in relation to the euro and the dollar. So if you want to see the impact, then at this point it depends on whether we trade with the UK more, we trade with the EU as a whole more, or we trade, using the dollar more. So if the dollar strengthens, what it means is that you need more cedis to buy the same $1. If the pound sterling weakens, it means you need less cedis to buy the same £1. And so this is where the first impact is. So on average, what you are seeing, because the pound is moving up and down with the dollar, or rather downwards with the dollar and with the euro, any currency that is linked to these three currencies also become volatile. And this is the global dimension of what we are talking about. Because these are the world's strong currencies. All other countries, do their business in those currencies. So anything that happens to those currencies will affect, the currency. I hope I have drawn the first link,
yes,
and how it affects the economy.
Yes. Currently, on the forex market, the Ghanaian cedi is doing quite well against the pound, because somewhere last week it was trading around 6 cedis. Now it's come to 5 point something, 5.5 thereabouts. Is that some good news?
I think it is true. First of all, we cannot attribute everything that is happening to the city to this particular development alone. Remember that our economy itself suffered a lot of setbacks, and it is just started strengthening. Last year we were supposed to grow at 3.5. The GDP, we grew at 3.9. And then the first quarter results that just came up shows that we have grown above 4% for the first quarter compared to the last 2 years. Now, what that means is that as the economy strengthens, the city also gains in value. It means that we are overcoming some of the setbacks, like the power crisis that we had. On the other hand, the developments in Europe, or even the softening in China, which has been playing out for some time now, and the non-recovery of the advanced countries has also been affecting the currency. Now, the decision for Britain to leave just adds to this uncertainty, and it makes the situation a bit more complex. So you are going to see currencies weaken in the very short term. The short term being, when the world is taking the impact of the British decision until UK and the EU will decide on a new relationship. Then we go into the medium term. For the short term, those who have speculated, and a lot of people speculated that Britain will vote to remain within the EU, means that those whose business is speculation in currencies will be losing because it moves in the other direction. And that is what is causing the current volatility. As we look at the linkages, you must also appreciate that, as I said, UK has become so close or an integral part of the EU that there was virtually no distinction when it comes to doing business in, say, Frankfurt and London. Now people are beginning to wonder whether this relationship will change, and the sovereignty of UK, which now may not have the free movement of its people, the free movement of businesses and investments, whether that will change. And that is the medium-term perspective that we are talking about.
Very well. Mr. Seth Terkper, just before I let you go, now trade between Ghana and the UK reached somewhere between $1.3 billion, pounds, I must say. Now, with the exit of UK from the European Union, is it going to affect our trade between the trade between Ghana and UK?
Well, when it comes to that, there is historical ties. You know that, Ghana and UK have, by virtue of being colonial masters, have had investments, longer than any other country, outside country, for a very long time. Secondly, the exit of the UK, from the EU, does not, for example, dismantle the cooperation that exists among Commonwealth countries, of which the UK is preeminent. So having said that, businesses are not going to dismantle immediately, those who do business with the UK. Neither would those who do business with other European countries almost immediately. But in the medium term, obviously, if the pound keeps weakening or the UK economy gets weaker, then you may see some investment and trade moving away from the UK to maybe the EU. And that is where the difference will begin, for the Ghanaian economy, whether the euro then becomes a more dominant currency like the pound sterling. But as I said, this will depend on the relationship. There are other relationships among the EU member countries. For example, Denmark, Norway have trade, investment, and other relationships which is not as integrated. And as I said, even the UK was using the pound sterling. So I think we would have to, for a long-term impact, we'll have to wait and see what agreement is reached. The other thing too is that now the UK has to negotiate with, let's say, China, America, and the rest as United Kingdom, no longer as a member of the European Union. And this would also have, an impact on what is happening globally.
So it means then that there's not going to be any change between the relations that we do still have with the UK in terms of trade?
No, what I'm saying is that because of historical ties and because UK will continue to be a strong economy, at least for some time to come, it is only in the medium term that one can see the full impact, because then the effect of the UK leaving the EU will begin to play out. Whether it leads to a softening of the UK economy, in that case, the businesses will begin, London has for a very long time been a very strong financial center. Even before the UK joined, the European Union. But I think the other thing which is being watched very keenly is what happens to Scotland and Northern Ireland. There was a referendum for Scotland to also go independent. And even though the UK as a whole voted to leave, the EU, in fact, when you take Scotland, the vote in Scotland, they voted to remain. And so there is a thinking now that this is the time for the Scottish people to also forge their independence. So that is another, situation that is being watched carefully, whether this decision could lead to a dismantling of the UK as we know it today into separate sovereign, states. So I think there's a lot, which analysts are examining, and in our case, looking at particularly foreign exchange, looking, at commodity prices, and looking at the very things which could go wrong or could go right in the global economy as a result of this decision.
Now, finally, before you go, Honorable Minister,
I think Britain has always, strengthened its relationship with the Commonwealth countries because of historical ties, to the point where now there are some non-English speaking, traditional non-English speaking countries who were never colonized by Britain, who are members, of the Commonwealth. And so yes, I do see the Commonwealth something that identifies Ghana with Nigeria, with Kenya, with Tanzania, and with Sri Lanka and other countries, which have been India and the rest. So the Commonwealth, as both an economic and diplomatic union, yes, I do see it, continuing, and the UK, yes, is truly interested in keeping it strong.
All right, we're grateful that you joined us on the line. Honorable Seth Terkper is the Finance Minister of the Republic of Ghana, and he has been sharing his thoughts on the Brexit, that is the Britain leaving the European Union. We're still staying on this very issue because Foreign Affairs Minister Hannah Tete says until Britain formally leaves the European Union, trade arrangements will continue to apply. According to recent statistics, Ghana is currently the UK's 5th largest trade partner in the sub-Saharan Africa.
Over the past year, the UK provided